It's great to be with you today. When I was walking in and enjoying this beautiful weather, I mean, you can really feel the seasons change. I thought we all should be out on the golf course instead of inside here. But it's a great day. It's a great day to be in Florida. It's my privilege to be with you today. I've had the opportunity since Congress has not been in session for the past couple of weeks to travel the state, and it reminds me of why we all live here. Because we live in such a beautiful place. And I know times are tough, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But it's worth remembering that we live in a place where other people go to vacation. And when the fall turns, as it has here in the last week, and you feel the cool weather in the morning, and if you've been to an airport lately, you've seen lots of people coming in from other places in the country, you realize really how fortunate that we are. I want to take a moment before I get started to recognize someone who introduced themselves to you, but really not in the way I think that gives her justice and gives her the credit she deserves. Carrie Feary is here. She's my Chief of Staff, and she's from Stewart. So I want you to know that when we are thinking about Florida and thinking about America while we do the work in Washington, we have a unique Stewart perspective because Carrie's always thinking of her hometown. And you know, she is the woman that helps run my life during the day, and then when I come home, I have another woman who runs my life, and that's my wife, Mikey. But she really plays an invaluable role, and I'm glad that she could be back home today to be here for this event. You know, it's been an incredible 13 months. I was sworn into the Senate September 10th of 2009. I was with you not too long before that, and I had a chance to address you in my prior role when I was chairman of the Gunster firm, and I'm glad to see my former colleagues here today. And things have really changed a lot, not just for me, but I think for America in that short period of time. Now, you might remember that I was appointed to fill the expiring term of Senator Mel Martinez, who stepped down at the end of 2009, and it was really sort of a whirlwind experience. And I'll remember, I'll never forget, I was on vacation up in the Palm Coast with my family. We're taking about a one-week beach vacation. My wife was there with our 3 sons, who were 6, 4, and 2 at the time. I found out while we were on that vacation that we were going to have another baby, which we've had. We have a new baby girl who's 6 months old, so it took us 4 tries, but we finally got the girl. Thank you. She gets whatever she wants. I've already told my wife. She will never hear no from me. But we were on, yeah, we'll see. I say that just because it feels good to say. So we were on vacation. I got a call from my friend, the governor, Governor Christ, and he said, "George, I want you to think about putting yourself forward for this position and be considered for it." Now, as many of you know, I was the governor's chief of staff, and I was his deputy attorney general, and I helped run his campaign for governor. We were very close, and it was a unique time because normally I would have been the person who would run this process for him of evaluating all the people that were to be considered. But this time I was to be considered along with another dozen or so people. And it was a really unusual time because for about 3 weeks I would talk to him almost every day, but we wouldn't talk about the fact that he was considering me. And frankly, I didn't think I was going to get picked. There were a lot of other fine people that he was evaluating. But to talk to him every day for 3 weeks was extremely awkward because we weren't talking about the fact that I was one of the folks under consideration. So it was an awkward time. Not as awkward as it is now. But if you want to see something change, watch politics in Florida because you can never script it, and it's about as unusual as it could be. But when you think about endings, which my time is about to end, you often think also about beginnings. It's strange, I'm going to recognition ceremonies now where they're congratulating me on my retirement, which as the second youngest senator, and soon to be the youngest again, come election day, it's strange to think about retiring. But you do think back about how you started. And I remember during this transition period in 2009, for about 3 weeks before the time I was picked to the time I was sworn in, we rushed up to Washington. I brought Carrie on to be the chief of staff, and we were having these meetings about how to transition a Senate office in a very short period. Who we were going to hire, who we were going to keep from Senator Martinez's office. And during that time, I went and met with the Secretary of the Senate, the Republican Secretary. There's a Democratic Secretary, there's a Republican Secretary. They kind of run things on the floor of the Senate. And while I was meeting with him, he said, well, do you want to go down on the floor and I'll show you how things work? So I wasn't prepared for this, and he said, let's go over. We walked across the hallway, we walked on the floor of the United States Senate, something that I had never done before. And that body is a very impressive place. And I walked down on the floor, and he said, this is going to be your desk. And there's only 100 of them. And this desk is more than 100 years old. And at some of these desks, people like Henry Clay and John Calhoun and Daniel Webster sat and spoke behind these desks. And he showed me how to use the microphone. You have these microphones that you pull up from the side, you stick them in your lapel. And he showed me how to address the President of the Senate in order to seek recognition so that I could speak on behalf of my state. And in that moment, when he was doing that, all of a sudden, it hit me. I could feel the responsibility. I could feel the fact that I represented 18.5 million people and that there are only 2 senators. You know, each state only gets 2. And you could be Rhode Island or Montana or Hawaii, states that we could stick the population of their states in a corner of some of our cities. But Florida just gets 2. And I knew that I was going to have to work really hard to not only learn the job, but to do the best I possibly could for you, because if I didn't, you weren't going to be represented. So I went back to the office, and Carrie will roll her eyes when she remembers this. But I said, I want to try to get 6 years out of 16 months. I want to do the most I can to represent this state in such a difficult time. And we've really tried to do that for you. When I first got there, Senator Voinovich of Ohio came up to me and said, George, you may only be here for 16 months, but you may be here for the most important 16 months in modern times. And I think that's right. If you think about the fact that we are fighting 2 wars at once, which we haven't done since World War II, that we are recovering from the worst financial meltdown since the Great Depression, and that this is the worst economy anyone in Florida can remember. We have nearly 12% unemployment in the state. And if you think about the folks that are underemployed, those who have lost their job and now are working 2 and 3 jobs, probably making less, we have about 1 out of every 5 folks in Florida who could work are either not working or not working enough. Their job is not enough for them to make ends meet. That's very tough times. We are number 1 in the country in the first 6 months of the year on being behind on our mortgage payments. We are number 1, 2, or 3, depending upon how it's counted, on being behind in mortgage foreclosures. It's a very tough time. And all the while we're trying to recover as a state and as a country, what Washington is doing, I think, unfortunately, is making things worse for you. I visit small businesses all over the state. Medium businesses and big businesses, but mostly small ones. And what they tell me is this: you in Washington, the Congress, keeps changing the rules. You keep making life unpredictable, and because of that, I don't know whether or not, as a business owner, I can hire. Let me give you an example. This health care legislation that Congress passed. I showed up to Washington, I was the 40th Republican senator. I think if I would have come in and there was 50 or 55 of us, I'm not sure I would have been so important, but it was kind of like showing up at the Alamo. And they were like, can you fire a gun? Can you help defend our freedoms? So we spent 23 days in a row in December of last year, the most continuous days in session that the United States Senate has had since the Senate decided whether or not to go to war in World War I. And we fought against this health care bill. And I think, unfortunately, the things that we said that it might do are starting to bear fruit. So now when I meet with business people, they say, look, I don't know if when I hire that next employee, whether or not I'm going to fall afoul of some new mandate, some new regulation, some new penalty. We now know that if that promise about if you like your health care, you can keep it, is not going to be true for 69% of small businesses. It's not going to be true for 80% of Americans, because your health care will not fit the new government mandate, so you will not be able to keep it. And for some businesses, they'll have to pay a penalty if their health care doesn't match what the new law requires. A 2,000-page bill, which will have thousands and thousands and thousands of pages more of regulations. You hear companies like McDonald's saying that they may drop their health insurance for 30,000 of their employees. And now the Secretary of Health and Human Services is saying, well, she may grant them a waiver. So we're going to have piecemeal waivers back and forth, and when you put a political person in the process of giving waivers, that's sort of troubling. So that's a challenge to businesses. We passed a financial regulation bill that one company in Florida, who's represented in this room today, I won't mention who it is, told me that it may make them move part of their business overseas to the Bahamas and move those workers over there so that they won't have to fall underneath those regulations. Another 2,000-page bill. And we just adjourned Congress. We just went home. I voted against adjournment without fixing your taxes. You don't know what your taxes are going to be next year. Not a person in this room, not from the nice people who are serving us our meal, to business owners, to anyone in this room knows what their taxes are going to be, either individually or in some ways corporate. Capital gains tax is set to go up at the end of the year. Tax on dividends is set to go up at the end of the year. All of your individual tax rates are set to go up. So how does a business plan if they don't know what their taxes are going to be? I talked with a CPA yesterday in Jacksonville who said, I'm trying to plan with all my business clients what they're going to do next year, and they just don't know what to do. Between healthcare, financial regulation bill, between not knowing what their taxes, our businesses, unfortunately, are frozen. My belief is that government should get out of the way. There are some things we can do, and I've been a part of things that we can do. I helped to author and sponsor and pass a small business bill. A bill that will cut taxes $12 billion for small businesses and provide $30 billion of lending to your community bank. Not Goldman Sachs, but the banker down the street who knows your business, who can give you a loan and help you get going. I've met with business people, and after the uncertainty complaint, the thing that I hear the most is, for small business people, is I can't get a loan. My credit line is frozen. I just met with an small advertising firm in Jacksonville yesterday who told me they want to expand, they want to tear the wall down, they want to put in 10 new employees. Their credit line is frozen. I met with a cheese and dairy manufacturer, of all things, in Jacksonville, a family business, Hispanic business, catering to that marketplace, selling their goods in Publix and Whole Foods, who couldn't get a loan from 10 banks, even though they've got an expanding business, and they had to sell a majority interest in their company to an outside investor. Which is great that they got the money, but it's sad that that family-owned business now has to be owned in a majority way by an outside person, because they couldn't get a loan. This program, this bill that we passed, will hopefully get money to your local bank to loan it to your local small business. We get this economy going again. Because if that small cheese and dairy manufacturer needs to build out, they're going to have to hire a construction company. Maybe they'll need to hire an accountant. And maybe they'll need to hire another small business in the community, and we can start things going. But that is the rare exception of what Washington does, I think, that helps you. Mostly, I think that what Congress has been doing has been hurting businesses. In fact, it's to the point where the Chamber of Commerce is in the news these days. You might hear that the President of the United States and others are bashing the Chamber of Commerce, which to me is ridiculous, because you're the people who create jobs. I mean, when did it become a sin to be a business owner? When did it become a bad thing to be creating the American dream? The reason why this country is exceptional, in part, is because any one of us can start a business. That we don't have to be the employee, we can be the employer. We don't have to work for somebody, we can be the owner. And the story of this country is marked with great examples of people who started businesses in their spare bedroom of their house or in their garage, whether it was Hewlett and Packard, who started a little company in their garage, or Google and Yahoo, who were started in dorm rooms. Some of the greatest companies in the world were started just by 1 and 2 people working together, Bill Gates and Microsoft. And for some reason, we have now demonized that. And now that's no longer a good thing in this country. That's something that we have to change. People will ask me, what's the most surprising thing about Washington? What have you found that has really shocked you or surprised you and put you back on your feet, on your heels? And the thing that really amazes me most is the way your government misspends your money. You know, right before I came to Washington, I was at the Gunster firm and I was helping to run the firm, and just like your business, we were looking at tougher times and we were trying to figure out how to cut costs. Gunster's got these really fancy little coffees in the break room. You know, the little individual ones that have all these exotic names. I was like, we should cut that. We should get those big carafes of coffee back, because that's got to be cheaper. You do this in your business. You do this with your family. Families across America are thinking, well, maybe next year we'll take a vacation, not this year. Maybe Susie's braces can wait till next year. Because you can't spend more money generally than you take in. If you do it as a business or as a family, eventually you go bankrupt. That doesn't happen in Washington yet. Now let me give you some pretty startling figures. Number came out last week. Congressional Budget Office said that in 2010 we spent $1.3 trillion more than we took in. $1.3 trillion. By the way, we did that last year, and we're going to do it again next year if the projections hold true. That's $4 trillion in debt in 3 years. 2007, January 1st, the national debt was $8.6 trillion. Today it's $13.6 trillion. That's $5 trillion in 3 years. I was sworn into the Senate on September 10th, 2009. As of October 20th, the debt's gone up $1.8 trillion in 13 months. Now put that into perspective. It took 200 years for this country for us to go $1 trillion in debt. 200 years to go $1 trillion in debt. We just did $1.8 trillion in 13 months. Why does this matter to you? Why do you care? You've always heard that we've had a debt. What is $1 trillion, $1 billion? These numbers get thrown around. Before I worked in Tallahassee, I didn't know what $1 billion was. And now the numbers are trillions. So why does it matter to your business? Why does it matter to your family? Let me give you some perspective on these numbers, because they are hard to get your brain around. $1 million is 1,000,000. $1 billion is 1,000 million. $1 billion is 1,000 million. $1 trillion is 1,000 billion. Okay, you still can't. That's hard to figure out what that means. Okay? Take $1 bills and put them on the floor like they're carpet. Line them up, back to back, head to head. $1 million covers 2 football fields. You can picture that in your mind. 2 football fields covered with the dollar bills. We all hope that we can have that someday. $1 billion covers Key West, Florida. 3.4 square miles of $1 bills. Picture Duval Street with $1 bills running down the middle. Stranger things have happened in Key West. $1 trillion covers Rhode Island twice. It is an enormous amount of money. So besides the fact that it's enormous, why does it matter to you? It matters to you because we are spending $200 billion a year right now on interest payments. The debt service on the money that we shouldn't have spent in the past. By the end of the decade, in 2020, the national debt is projected to be $25 trillion. Then we'll spend $900 billion on interest, half of which we'll borrow from foreign countries if they'll lend it to us. My friends, the government will not function paying $900 billion in interest. It's like the family that has its credit card bill that it doesn't pay every month, and the carrying cost goes up and up and up. It's not going to last. Now, this doesn't happen in state government, Representative Snyder. It doesn't happen in county government, Commissioner Campy, because you all have to balance your budgets. But Washington doesn't. So we just print more money and borrow more money. Social Security used to be the place all the money was robbed from. People in Congress took the money that they needed to spend starting in the 70s out of the Social Security Trust Fund because there were more people paying in than taking out. So they took the money, spent it, and they wrote a big IOU. You can't do that anymore because now there's more people retiring than paying in. So this year we went negative in Social Security for the first time. More money going out than money going in. That's why you hear about money being borrowed from foreign countries. Didn't have to do that before because they just borrowed it from Social Security. When you figure in the amount that's owed to Social Security and Medicare and all these other entitlements, we really owe about $60 trillion. So how does Washington budget? We don't. Congress just takes last year's budget and adds money to it. So we're still funding programs from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, priorities back then of who knows who. People don't know where we're spending this money on. Trust me. No one in Washington knows 1/10 of what we're spending our money on. whether the programs are efficient and effective, whether or not they're achieving a public goal, whether we could do it without it. We've added 150,000 new federal employees in the last 18 months at a medium salary of $70,000 a year. 150,000 new employees in the last 18 months. My friends, it is simply unsustainable. And Congress doesn't bring these people in and say, Madam Secretary, Mr. Secretary, tell us what you do in your agency, let's go through your budget, and let's figure out whether or not those are worthwhile programs. It doesn't happen. There is no oversight. But there needs to be. What I've proposed is we should go back to 2007 level spendings and cap spending. Why 2007? Although that was the beginning of a difficult time in Florida nationally, the recession didn't start till December of 2007. So we should have enough tax receipts in 2007, in a good year, to be able to keep the government functioning. If we did that, if we said across the board, we're going to cap spending, what would that do? It would require us to do what we've done in Tallahassee. It would require us to do what you do in your business. We'd have to evaluate all the programs, find out whether they're efficient or effective, and then we cut the ones that weren't. And if we did that, and we froze spending for 10 years at 2007 levels, we balanced the budget in 13, and we cut the national debt. It wouldn't be $25 trillion in 2020. We cut it in half from 13 to 6, and we would save America. It's not rocket science. It's what you would do if you were me and you were there. Now, I have proposed this. I've got 5 or 6 people who've co-sponsored it with me in the Senate. But most people won't, because you have to talk about defense spending, Social Security, and Medicare. And it's not just a Democrat or Republican problem. It's a problem with everyone. They don't want to tackle the tough issues. The good news is you're about to have an election to vote in. And you have an opportunity to send folks to Washington, folks like Congressman Rooney, who, by the way, is doing a fantastic job, who are going to hold government accountable. But you can't just do it November 2nd. You're going to have to do it in 2012 and 2014, because it's going to take a long time to change the culture. I think the majority of my colleagues think their first name is Senator, because they've been there a really long time. And they think that what happens in Washington is normal. But it's not. Carrie will tell you, I come back to the office, I feel like I'm the only crazy person. Because I can't imagine and believe that this is what we're doing. And every day I get frustrated by it. Because I believe it's our duty, first and foremost, to jealously guard your tax dollar. We are taking money from you. Sometimes up to 40%, almost 40% of what you make. That's not including your state taxes, and your real estate taxes, and every other tax you pay, on your cell phone, on your cable. I think it's our job to jealously guard that money and not take a dollar more from you than we should, and make sure that every dollar is being spent well. But that's not the...